It's Lil Baby.
All right. Welcome to episode 48 of Conversations with Chai. I'm your host, Ihram Chowdhury, aka Lil Baby Ram. And today I have with me Anu, Aseer, and Ojee. So this episode we are going into everything Diljit, payment, and the dance community as a whole. But so for the listeners that don't know, it came out basically like 2 weeks ago, a few weeks ago now, that Diljit, who's been touring the US, is going to be touring the UK, probably touring the world. Dancers basically came out and said that they were not paid for the show. There was dancers that basically said, hey, we got offered to do the show, but we turned it down because they weren't paying. Then, to put more fuel on the fire, Manpreet Toor, and somebody else that you guys named. Who else?
Rajat Bhatta.
Manpreet Toor, Rajat Bhatta, both came out, big brands that said, yo, Manpreet said, hey, we've danced for Diljit before, and I did it for free. So now the conversation ends up being Diljit, who in our culture is 1A, basically. I would say that, right? 1A of this music thing. If he's not paying his dancers on a tour that's basically global, how does that ecosystem now function for dancers? So y'all three are on, all choreographers, dancers inside New York, Ojee, y'all have all worked with tours, right? And I really wanted to kind of bring y'all on to discuss, like, because again, like this platform is so much on like creatorship and making sure that we're all getting our just due. But I really want to understand, like, if I'm Diljit or if I'm a dancer, what is that just due? Because I do think that there's like a lot of sides to this conversation, right? I think the conversation that Manpreet was talking about is like, yo, dancers, like, go ask for your just due.
Mm-hmm.
But let me ask y'all this, right? Like, if you're a dancer right now and Diljit is coming to you and saying like, hey, come do my show, what is your first thought in terms of like my value?
Well, I can start. I specifically like to use the word compensation.
Okay.
Because while, yes, it is great to get paid for everything you do, and I really do believe that artists should get paid. It's work. We are professionals that have an expertise. That's what we're bringing to add value to a production. We should be getting paid, but at minimum, there should be compensation. So what that means to me is if you're going to promise something like exposure, right? And that's the real hook for why someone is asking you to perform without being paid, then there should be compensation. To me, again, the ideal situation is getting monetary compensation. But secondary, I would have said Diljit has a huge platform, right? Like he's huge. And something as simple as all of these dancers that danced in all of these cities, when he makes his Instagram post for that city, tagging them, right? Like that to me is exposure, because then people that are interested are seeing the names of the people. So if they want to hire these people, they can. It's also like a very tangible thing for these dancers to be able to add it to their own portfolio, their own resume, and be able to trace that back to something tangible associated with Diljit, as opposed to just having like phone footage, right, from someone that's in the audience. I know a lot of these times when like dancers are dancing with a big artist, with tour, like they are not getting spotlighted. So they're kind of there as a whole, as a dance group, to be able to add this. And that's part of the job, and that's A-okay. But if we're going to say exposure, then there really should be something that can potentially lead to a next job, that can potentially lead to monetary compensation elsewhere, or building your platform. And I think that's such a simple way to do it. Like if you cannot budget for it, which truly I do think that big artists with big tours should be budgeting for it, the same way you budget for a lighting person, the same way you budget for sound, et cetera, et cetera. But at minimum, there should be that much, because that will turn into some kind of value versus just you get to say that you did it. Like, it is a prestigious thing to be able to say you performed on the stage and with this person, but imagine having something tangible to show that, yes, I performed, this person knows who I am, and they are essentially vouching for me with other people, that I can do this.
I'm glad you used the word budget, right? So because I wanna get into that part, right? So because we're using like Diljit, right? But a lot of this is like, of course, like Diljit is not, I don't think, making the call, right? It is still on him because you're the head of this and you're the face of this to establish said budget. But a lot of this is tour managers that make that decision. So if I'm a tour manager, and this is like, again, like I'm playing devil's advocate because y'all know where I stand on this type of stuff, right? If I'm a tour manager, my thing is to, make as much money from this tour as possible. And how do I do that is keep my costs low. So as I'm budgeting for this, I look at my dance budget, right? And I'm like, hey, what is the lowest possible amount that I can make this? The lowest possible amount is kind of determined on what the marketplace is. Because for Manpreet, and whoever else said no, that's because you're too big for that brand, right? That exposure doesn't really mean anything for you. You're Manpreet Toor, like you have a brand outside of this. But I would look to then everybody who said yes, because then it shows me that the marketplace is actually, hey, I can pay dancers $0 and still have full dance sets. Because that's essentially what he had. He still had, it's not like they were like lacking dancers, right? They still had full sets in every city that they went. Which then the conversation ends up being on the dancers, be like, yo, like if y'all are shooting the community in the foot, because if you're charging $0, who am I to charge whatever it is that I'm charging? Let's just say you think that like you're the greatest dancer out there, and you're like, yo, I want to charge this. Unless you can prove that my dance has $150 worth of value or $250 worth of value compared to the person who's gonna ask for $0. Like, how do we navigate like that, right? Because it starts off with the individual dancers, right? Like, Ojee, like you've worked I've seen you do dances for tours that have hit New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you establish like, yo, like, what am I getting paid for this?
I think the issue or the attention should not be on the dancers who decide whether to take up an opportunity or not if they get paid in a way that would negatively negatively view this situation, because sometimes when you're pursuing this art very seriously and whatever stage you are in your career, sometimes you might just have to take the opportunities where you don't get paid. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. Everyone should get paid at every stage they're in. Sometimes you might take the gigs that you don't want to do, but it's the small steps that help you get to where you want to be. So in my experience with working with certain artists, sometimes I've gotten paid, sometimes I've not, but I'm not like Manpreet where I do dance full time and I have a massive social media following where, everyone knows that I'm a dancer and I'm at this level. So sometimes I feel like I can't be as picky with some of the opportunities that I get. You should just kind of take what comes. And like I said, I'm not saying that that's what everyone should do. This is sometimes how I feel I might pursue this type of situation.
I think so. Like that, I think is important. I'm glad that you highlighted, right? Because I think about like like Manpreet is like a good example. If you're Manpreet, you dancing at Diljit is a draw, right? It's like you're promoting it. People are going to be like, oh, Manpreet's dancing at this, right? Like I'll keep an eye out. And it's unfortunate, right? But it is like the reality of like the situation is that like if I'm coming to a Diljit show, I'm not paying attention to all of the dancers that are involved, right? Like I don't know the faces and like the names. They're obviously adding value because if you went to the show and they didn't have dancers, you would notice the absence of dancers. You'd be like, oh, like this is like, it adds to the aesthetic of the show. It adds to the production value of the show. But it's unfortunate you don't care who the people truly are that are dancing. And they are dancers that have their hard work put in, right? They are dancers that have their brands. They are dancers that are respected. They are dancers that are amazing choreographers. But as an audience person or as a tour manager that's looking at the show, I'm going to look at it and be like, why, like, what value are you bringing to this table? So like, let me ask y'all this, right? Like if where y'all are at with y'all careers, right? Somebody comes to you, how are you vocalizing that value? Like what is your individual value, right? Like, cause we're saying that like, oh, you have to get to a Manpreet level to get paid to do a huge tour. Cause you're saying like, yo, the opportunities that you take, because a lot of times we all take opportunities that are like smaller, right? Because for brand recognition. But if you're a dancer, this is what you're working to. Like if you're a US dancer, you're working to get on tour with Chris Brown. Like that is it. You're working on tour to get on tour with Beyonce. Like that is the pinnacle of, yo, I made it, right? Like the Les Twins are like now touring with like Beyonce. Like they made it, right? And they're getting paid for that. But if Diljit is, if we're saying that Diljit is the Drake of this shit, right? You worked to get it, you got the recognition, you got invited, and now you're not getting paid for it, then what is the avenue to get paid for that? Is there an avenue to get paid for it?
Is there an avenue to get paid for these, I guess we call it gigs in the dance world for dancers? OG said it well, if we get a gig, we don't get too picky. We kind of take that opportunity and hope that that will lead to the next one. Also, Anu said really well before too, it's, you know, I think it's sad that dancers aren't, not, I don't mean to speak on behalf of everybody, but for those, and I think the point is being made very clear, it's almost a form of respect that needs to be implemented into the industry for dancers that aren't recognized, or Anu said it perfectly, compensated for their time, for their energy. But I think if you merge the answers right here together, you see the big picture, which is, you know, we're not really recognized as a higher class of artist. It's kind of, we're in a sad way, and sometimes it's, you know, you have to kind of take the punches as they come as a dancer, but that's what makes us stronger. We as dancers, we are warriors. We're passionate. We do it out of love, but it's really, it's vital to tying back into what you're saying about finding that next avenue. It's never really confirmed for us. It's really kind of, that's a really great question to ask, honestly. I'm sorry, I need like
No. I sorry.
I was going to say, personally, though, I think we have a responsibility as artists.
Mhm.
I'm not blaming any of the dancers. Like, it is hard to be a performing artist. It's really hard to do it full time. And yeah, I mean, you're making tough choices. Like, in this exact moment right now, what is more valuable to me? The monetary compensation that I will or won't be getting, or what this could do for me in the future? It's like, it's a really tough question, but that's where I think that we kind of have a responsibility. And I would love to see, especially South Asian artists, kind of step it up a little bit in terms of community. We talk a lot about community, and I think everybody has a little bit of a different definition, but we have strength in our numbers. And I think that we need to have a little more transparency, a little more communication. And in order to have that transparency, everybody needs to feel a little bit of a sense of responsibility, right? If everybody feels a little responsibility, we feel safer to have conversations out in the open, to have more communication. Like, I'll give an example that's not related to dance. In addition to being a dancer choreographer, I'm also a singer and actor. And I did a show, and we went through several rounds of contract negotiations. And those contracts happen individually. It's a one-to-one. But there are differences between the contracts, even though we are doing essentially the same thing or similar things. So at one point, I kind of took it on myself to talk to a group of people that were doing the same thing. And we were very open with each other in terms of what was in our contract. And that was the way that we were able to push to get better for all of us. Because you need to look out for yourself, right? Obviously, it's a business at the end of the day. A tour manager, a production company, et cetera, their goal is, how can we make the most money? That's how you keep going in this industry. So it's up to the individual to say, okay, I'm going to protect myself. I'm going to make sure that I am getting what I need to get. But that is so much easier done when you can do it with people, when you have someone to bounce off of. And I'm lucky enough, the reason that I knew to do that is because in prior shows, I have friends that I'll call when I get a contract and be like, hey, have you worked at this place? Have you worked with these people? Can you take a look at this? Tell me, like, does it seem standard? Is there something I should push for? Does something seem weird here? And I feel like I'm really grateful to have that for myself. But within our South Asian dance community, I don't think we have that. And a lot of that has to do with people are putting the individual first. And I get it. But there's at some point we have to say, you know what? We have value, we have leverage, and we should build that together to ask for a little bit better, right? Like this Diljit tour in particular, there were great dancers that got asked that said no because they weren't being compensated. There were many great dancers that got asked that said yes, that did perform. But this conversation didn't come out until after these concerts, right? All of this existed, but it didn't come out until then. And someone who, let's say someone who's not in the industry or is just getting started in the industry, the dream is to be doing these kinds of things. But do you know that your dream thinks that you have no value?
But so this is where I want to make sure that, because we always have, this is a continuous conversation, right? That we talk about, like, not even just South Asian dancers, but South Asian creatives as a whole, right? And that whole, I'm not even talking about the people who said no, right? I want to focus in on the people who said yes, right? Because I say it all the time. When you say yes and you're doing it below fair equity value, you are fucking up the entire marketplace, right? Because if I'm a tour manager, right, and I can pay somebody $0 to offer the same exact service, then I'm going to pay the person $0 to offer the same exact service. So I get, like, again, I know y'all don't want to like shit on y'all peers, right? For everybody who said yes, but it truly is fucking the game up, right? Because until what you're saying, until you collectively bargain and say, no, this is the base rate. Like, if you're hiring any dancer for any tour as South Asians, right? I don't know if it's a South Asian union that needs to happen or just private conversations. It needs to be, this is the bare minimum wage that if we're doing a show, you need to pay, right? Like, you see this in movies, you see this in the NBA, like, where people aren't talking about the top of the food chain here. Those people are always going to get theirs. We're talking about everybody else, right? Like, LeBron is always going to get paid, right? You collectively bargain for the vet who's done this for 15 years and without collectively bargaining is going to make like $5, right? Like, that's who you're fighting for, right? Like, because all the dancers who said no, yo, God bless the fact that they were able to say no, and they're probably still able to get revenue streams for their dance if they dance full time in other avenues. But for everybody else, like, they're not fighting, because I want to preface this too, right? A lot of people said no to this conversation. A lot of dancers said no to this conversation. And I thought, and I don't want to put it like in a negative spin on it, but I thought that was really telling. Because back to the focus on self, you said no to this conversation because you have relationships, and there's tour managers that you have relationships with, there's artists you have relationships with, and that's going to maybe push people the wrong way. And you're fine with that because you're still making money out of this. But what about everybody else in the ecosystem, right? That doesn't have your brand, right? Like, Manpreet saying it, I thought was like a really big deal, because I was like, damn, like, you have everything to lose and nothing to gain from this because you're still doing fine. But she understands that, like, yo, it's not for me. She's not fighting for her. She's never going to do that tour ever, right? Like, unless they're giving her like a real bag because she has real brand value. It's for everybody else down the ecosystem.
I think we're still in kind of uncharted territory. There's not been enough of us that have gotten to do things like this, that there are precedents that are set, standards that are set. So I definitely won't blame any dancer for taking the gig, for not having the conversation. I get it, but my ask to our community is, think about what could be done with more transparency. Just think about what a better position we would be in, rather than each individual feeling like, I'm hitting this wall, I've got to fight, there's nobody that has my back. If we can get to a place where there's a little bit more transparency, because ultimately everybody has a reason for why they choose the choice that they do. We're working with very, very smart individuals. All of our peers are so intelligent, so talented. They are smart. They have their reasons for doing what they do. But I think that there's importance in being able to express those reasons, right? Like, if we have those conversations out loud, then we can figure out, okay, well, then what is something that's acceptable across the board that we can say, okay, this is our basic minimum standard that we will accept as a whole, right? Like, I think that there's a lot of because it is uncharted territory, there's a lot of different influences that go into this decision that maybe don't really align with what a professional wants to do in this industry. Meaning, for years, there have been like Bollywood tours, right? Like the celebrities come and they do a big tour, even Diljit and other artists like that. And for those tours, a lot of times the backup dancers come from dance schools. And the way that it works for a lot of these dance schools is that the dancers are paying to perform, or they are required to sell a minimum number of tickets to perform. So think about if you did grow up dancing, right? And if that was your exposure, and if that's what you did, and so your parents, bought the 4 tickets, whatever, everybody came and saw you, great. That is how you know a tour works. You're thinking about, should I go into this industry? Should I not? And then something like this comes about. You're told that dancers, there's no compensation for that. That's not going to be a red flag necessarily if you're not aware that, hey, actually, there's a real world in which dancers do make money from dancing.
I completely get that, right? I completely get that. But we are now in a stage, and this is why like the catch up and like like us being in uncharted territory, absolutely, right? But we are now in the area where, this tour by Diljit is managed by Rock Nation. Like, you don't think that this tour is making like a shit ton of money?
No,
like,
it definitely is.
And this is why I say the catch up needs to happen faster, because there is now money in this ecosystem, right? Like, that tour made a lot of money, and we're not even talking like, pay these dancers. Like, hopefully one day the goal is to make sure all of these dancers are on a salary and can get paid. But again, maybe we're not there yet, but we're talking about just baseline, get some money out of it. Right? Like position yourself where the offer comes to get some money out of it, because the tour did make money, and the marginal value of each dancer, let's say like each dancer asked for $250 for all of that work, right? 3 hours worth of work, nothing crazy. That doesn't move their needle cost-wise at all. Hopefully we get to the place where, you know what? We got to really budget for dancers. But let's start somewhere. Let's start with some compensation, because then we can push the needle and be like, you know what? Like last year we did this shit for $250. We set the market. This year, like I know this tour is bigger. Let's do it for $500. 2 years ago we did it for $250. This year, I know this tour is bigger because Diljit is bigger. Let's do it for $750 to $1,000. Right? Because you have to start with the initial benchmark. Because right now you're negotiating. Like if dancers, y'all get approached, right? You're negotiating against a 0. So anything you ask for is going to sound like a lot, right? Like, and that's like, again, like I get what you're saying, right? Because you're starting off negative. You're starting off like, I got to sell tickets to do this.
Well, it's not even that. My point is, I think that change, if it comes, it needs to come from the tours. And it's not going to come from the tours, right? We have to do it for ourselves.
You have to take it.
So you have
to take it.
So we need to have that transparency. And my thing is, like, if people are not having conversations, if we're not talking about it, and all you know is what you know, right? And what you know is dancers don't get paid, then how are we collectively going to raise that benchmark? Like, we need to have the transparency, the conversation to be like, hey, no, actually, like, I'm a professional artist and I get paid for all the other things that I do. So we need to figure out the compensation situation here for everybody. Like, if you don't already know that that is even a possibility, and if nobody's talking to each other, there's no transparency, then we're not going to be able to make that change. And we have to, because they are not going to. They're retaining more money by not paying people.
I would say, though, that, and this is where, like, again, like, it's on y'all, it's on Manpreet, it's on, like, a lot of y'all who have done this, right? Like the vets in this, the seasoned vets in this, have to look at everybody and ask, why did you do that? Like, I think that's a valid question, right? Because you're saying that, hey, like, people have other reasons for doing it, but I think it's important to ask why to get to the root of that, right? Like when I took a deal, right? I had a bunch of OGs hit me and be like, did they pay? Like about the sponsor, did they pay you? Right? Because they don't want me accepting something low to fuck it up for them. Because that's what it happens, right? If I say yes to a small bag, they're just going to consistently hit me. I'm not making a lot of money from it. And now it's fucking up everybody else ahead of me, right? So like when we're saying like, yo, these dancers and like, again, like they have their reasons, I think it's important to understand the real reason and does it make sense? Because I think you said this off mic, right? The hey, this is for recognition or this is for like brand. Is it truly for a brand? Because you doing Diljit one time, did exposure, did that really give you the exposure that you think that it gave you? Like, did it have the value that you think? Because let's say like your rate is like $500. So you have to think that the exposure that you got out of it, if you did it for free, was worth $500. Is it?
I think that's really tough to determine because like Anu said, this is such uncharted territory. And the industry of, dance and artistry, even outside of South Asian space, is so competitive, to get these spots to dance on tour or these opportunities or music videos or, performing at shows. I think it's a very individual decision whether or not they pursue these opportunities for monetary value or not. And I believe even for myself and my peers and other dancers, they, take a moment to weigh the pros and cons. Okay, I'm getting paid or I'm not getting paid. If I'm not getting paid, what am I getting out of it? Exposure. My friends and family will see they have the name of Diljit, and then they go ahead and perform, and then they get the reception and the feedback that they get that might catapult them to an opportunity where some other artists.
All right, let me ask you this. You danced for a pretty big artist pretty recently, right? I saw you there. So let me ask you this. Like, I know you as a dancer prior to that, right? What was the immediate impact? And I get that it's like hard to string the points together, but what was the immediate impact of you dancing for that artist? Like, what was the recognition? What was the brand pickup from that?
I think for myself, when I danced for that particular artist, personally for me, people took me very seriously as a performer. Friends, family, those in the industry, because they saw me with that artist. They saw me, develop a connection with that artist, and I performed with that artist multiple times to the point where, people will think, oh, she's a legit dancer. And,
Ojee, you were a legit dancer before that.
Of course.
But you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't, and again, like, I didn't look at you differently because I had you, I had Rad dance for this artist, right? Like, I didn't look at you guys differently as dancers because you did this placement, honestly, right? I thought it was cool for y'all, right? Because I know the artist and I'm like, okay, like that's cool. But I don't think that, because what is the word that we keep using? Why do people do this? Like brand awareness? Exposure. I don't think that the exposure is what people think it is.
Well, that's why I said what I said in the beginning, which is if you can make exposure tangible, then yes, it's worth it. Like myself, right? I don't have a huge following on Instagram. I do use social media for my work, so it would be really beneficial for me to have a bigger reach, a bigger following. So if I have the opportunity to work with a big artist and they're like, we don't have it in our budget, we can't pay you. My ask then is, okay, what's the trade-off? But if they say like, we're going to tag you in this, I think that actually does quantify to something, right? For maybe not for everybody. Maybe, like you said, not for a Manpreet. She's got a huge brand of her own. Maybe that won't make a dent. People maybe already associate her with that artist. But for someone who does not have that level of recognition, being tangibly associated with a big artist like that could really amount to things. And that is a compensation that I would definitely consider taking. It's not monetary. Do I think they should provide monetary? Yes. Do I think they can? Yes. But at minimum, this is something that I can say, okay, this should put me in a better place than I was when I started this.
And that has, and absolutely agree, that is a true tangible value, right? Anytime we post anything on social media, like trust me, somebody who runs ads, right? Like I pay for ads. Right?
It costs nothing for them to tag.
Right? But it is a lot of value, right? Like that I completely understand. Like if a dancer's like, yo, like even if they negotiate that in their contract, be like, yo, because that's valid. If I come to the table and I'm all like, yo, I'm gonna do this for free, but you have to tag me in it. Because then it's like, yo, absolutely. Because how much is it going to cost me? You have to really break this down. Like, this is where like I think the business needs to come to creatives, right? You have to really break it down. You have to sit and be like, yo, how much is $500 worth of ads, right? What is the reach on that? Like, how many people will see this if I spend $500 on ad work on all of my creative work? And then break it down. Diljit has what, like 2 million, 3 million followers? Okay. If he shares it to his 2-3 million, yo, that's not physical money, but that has value.
Mm-hmm.
But I better really be extracting that.
And that's what I'm wondering is like, what if we were one day in a position that, yes, we're still working on the monetary, that is an uphill battle. We will win it at some point, but we're still working on it. But what if we have a group of dancers that has been asked to perform and they collectively negotiate to get tagged in this post, right? If you have one person that they're like for theater, right? Like if you're in the union for Actors Equity Association, like when you do a production, you elect a deputy and they are kind of in charge of making sure that everything is running the way it's supposed to be, and they communicate with the equity office if there are any issues. Like you come to them with any issues that you've had to get the resolution for it. And so imagine a situation like that, right, where we have everybody is transparent with each other about what they are not receiving, why they are not doing it, and then you can come together as one voice to say, hey, you said that there's no money in this for us, and we said yes, we have accepted that, but we require this that costs $0. Like, I just really wonder what that would do for us.
No, I think it would move mountains. And so like behind the scenes, right? Like people, so it's interesting. So people hit me and were like, yo, I think that the way that the community approached it probably wasn't the best way. Because yes, Manpreet posting it, people posting about it that said no, definitely brought awareness to the issue. But the people behind the scenes were like, yo, you know what would have been more valuable? Going to the tour managers, right? And saying, yo, exactly that. Like, yo, if there's no money, this is the comp. If there is money, this is the comp. Because I do think that amazing awareness for the issue is incredible, right? Because now I think it does put, like, because now if you're Diljit, right? Even though we keep using Diljit, and I want to clarify that it is, Diljit, but it's also like all the tour managers that like, I don't think he's physically making this decision, right? But now it does pressure him because of the public outcry to go to his tour managers and be like, yo, like next time around, like we got to pay him something. Because I do think that will happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that the more direct route to that is going directly to the business and asking for that, right? Because again, this conversation is going to either happen multiple times over the course of history, or it's going to progress within the business itself. Because again, we care about this now. People are going to talk about it. There's next time around, I'm sure people are going to get paid. But then how do we continuously push the needle? It's not going to be consistently public outcries, because then eventually people are going to be like, all right, you're getting paid. Like now we're trying to fight out what fair value is. Right. No, but going to the tour director, going to the teams and being like, yo, this is now the value, right? Because y'all ever hear the story about like how the Friends cast collectively bargained?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They could have all came to the table individually with their agents and been like, yo, and made good money. Yep. But up and down, they were like, yo, like let's do this together so we all get paid more or less. And this is why the pressure ends up being the people who are at the top of this food chain, right? Because they're the ones who really decide whether they're willing to put themselves out on a limb for the betterment of everyone, right? Because the difference between them collectively bargaining, again, like let's say like you're a dancer and your rate is like 2K. Okay, if I collectively bargain with the person whose rate right now is 0, I might have to take a hit. But in the long run, you're moving the bottom line for everybody. And I think that's the position, again, like, does it happen through conversation? Does it happen through some sort of union? Maybe. I don't know, like, if it's like a union, like it took music a long time to even get there, and it really hasn't, right? It's gotten there in acting with SAG, but there needs to be some sort of like mechanism or OGs that say, hey, we need to extract value from this.
I think the attention, like we've been saying, should definitely be on the dancers and those in the top of the food chain and in the industry to, advocate for themselves, advocate for those who are in a different position, who are new in their career, to get paid, to, be properly recognized. But I think also this conversation should be about the tour managers, those who are in the business. If you want dancers, you have to pay for it. If you don't want to pay for dancers or give them something in return, do not have dancers. You need to respect the art in which we provide. Because in my experience, when I've worked with that artist, he could have not had dancers in the background. But his tour manager was like, you know what? Dancers will really add to the show. They would make the show more exciting, add to the visuals, really make the artists look better. And we will compensate the dancers because we know the value they provide to our show.
I think you gotta show that though, right? Because I think that you have to show that ends up being, again, all these dancers, like different cities, like I'm Diljit, I'm coming to New York, I'm Diljit, I'm going to California, I'm Diljit, I'm going XYZ place. If I'm a dancer, I have to make sure that, we all got hired. What does your show look like without us? Because we haven't seen that, right? Like we haven't had to see that. Like we haven't had to see like, there's no dancers here. Like what does that do for your tour? And when we do tour managers finally realize like, okay, like we need the dancers, right? It's interesting because like I think like again like Manpreet like being the one who again like brought it out, tour managers came after her, and they were like, "Yo, we didn't reach out to you," but again like that wasn't her point. It wasn't that you didn't reach out to me this time. It was you didn't pay me for the last time, and you didn't now come back around and decide, hey, I'm gonna pay you next time. It's you just went to other dancers who didn't charge you. Like that's like the tough part, right? It's like, if you're Manpreet, right? You're like, yeah, you said yes to the $0 bag and you danced for Diljit because it was good for your brand then. And you think, next time around, I'm gonna hit a check on this. But then what happens? I go to the marketplace again and I find the $0 dancer. And if you find the $0 dancer, it happened. And again, those people again probably did it for recognition. What happens the next time? They probably don't get hired. They go to somebody else who's cheaper. And it really has to be a widespread collective bargain. And I think like when my OGs hit me, there's a certain level of like, I don't want to say shame, but there is a certain level of like expectation on like understanding like, hey, this is our value. You may have an understanding of what your value is individually, but this is our value. Right? Like I get really mad, and this is a conversation that I'm super passionate about because I look at it all as a whole. Creatorship as a whole has inherent value, and we're all creating an ecosystem. We're all competing for a lot of the same brand deals. We're all competing for a lot of the same like awareness. So when y'all aren't getting paid, nobody else is getting paid because dancers are it's a physical act. Absolutely. For Diljit. That's a physical, like you're part of the tour. So what happens to everybody else who's just bringing awareness to the tour? They're not getting paid? Because if the person who's in the tour isn't getting paid, how can then I ask, like, my appearance deserves a fee? I say that all the time in like New York City, like party scenes, right? I'm like, my appearance, like, again, you better be paying the people who are performing for sure. But I want to start asking for like, my appearance there deserves a fucking fee. Because there's going to be people who show up. I'm not talking about me, but like, there's going to be people who show up because I'm there. And artists do that shit all the time. Like, artists do that shit all the time. You think your favorite artist just wants to go to Harbor? No, they're getting paid to go to Harbor, right? And they're charging because they're like, me being here adds a value. So if they're able to charge just to show up, and we can't even get to the place where we can charge for an actual service that you're providing, how do we move the ecosystem forward? And I get like, we're all in this trying to figure it out, but I think that these conversations have to be pushed along a little bit faster and harder because now there is real money in this ecosystem, right? Like if you're a South Asian dancer, that is the pinnacle of what you're going to do is dance for Diljit. That is the top, right? Yeah. And that's why, like, my message to, Diljit, pay the dancers. I know we're saying tour managers and pay the dancers. You the Drake of this shit. You set the bar. Because if you're any other artist, because we all agree, right? Like Diljit is 1A on this. Like he's Drake of this shit, right? If you're AP, you're Mickey, you're Ezu, right? I'm gonna be looking at all my artists and being like, why would I pay the dancers? Diljit's not paying the dancers, and he's the one who's making the most money out of this. So I have no inherent responsibility to pay for it. And again, I do think that Diljit's team and Diljit will come around and say like, yo, look, let's pay these dancers. But I think it'll have like a reverberating effect throughout the ecosystem.
Yeah. I think these conversations are really crucial though, because one really interesting thing about using Diljit specifically is I think there's like it's kind of a cultural difference. And I've heard it a lot with people saying, well, you should be honored to perform for Diljit, or I was honored to be a part of that. Like, why do you need to get paid? And that is something that outside of the South Asian space in general, like, or let's say a predominantly white space, right? Like, that's not going to fly. You can't just be like, you should be honored to be here. No, if I'm providing a service, if I'm adding to the value of your production, then I deserve to be paid my value. I deserve to be compensated. But we have this kind of thing that's come. And I think that that is something that Diljit has performed so many times in India, right? And like other South Asian spaces. And I think that that is kind of the mindset that has prevailed.
Do you think they're getting paid over there?
I don't think so. If so, definitely not fairly. I think there is a big sense of you should be honored to be a part of this. So anybody that they can get away with being like, no, do it for the pride, do it for the honor, they do. And that is a mindset that does still fly a lot in India, in other places like that. And it's something that like is very different here. And I think we need to spearhead that to say like, no, that's not something that we're going to accept. Yes, we are honored to be asked, but you are asking us because you recognize that we have a value. It's not just that you gave an opportunity to a random person. You're giving an opportunity to someone based on their years of training, their hard work, their platform that they've built that has value.
I think a part of it is also the idea that like a lot of like South Asian creators, South Asian dancers, we look at this as a part, like the creative part, as the part-time thing that we do. We look at it as a
And that's
side
the
hustle.
problem.
Because a lot of the people who said no, I noticed, right, are
Full-time.
professional full-time dancers,
Mhm.
right? So they don't have the luxury to say, yo, don't pay me. Because everybody who said yes, they all probably up and down, probably work in tech, probably work some job, right? So they're not relying on this to pay their bills and feed their families.
I mean, not 100%.
Not 100%,
But yeah.
but I think it's like a
It's
large,
easier
it's
to
a
make
large
that decision.
sentiment, right? Because I had to like when, like again, like I like recently like left corporate America, and now I have to evaluate every little thing that I do as what is my compensation for this? Because this is what I do full time. If I show up somewhere, this is my fucking time. Right? Because before it was like, you know what? I'm getting a check from Amazon like once a month. Like it doesn't fucking matter, right? Like, oh, sure, I'll just come to your show and like do some background stuff, right? And like I'll produce some content for it because it's good for me. But now it's like, yo, that shit costs me money and I'm not going to get compensated for it. And like that's the other brutal part of this. For those dancers, it's not that they just dance for free. It costs them money.
Yeah.
It costs them time. It costs them money, traveling, whatever the fuck, right? Like there's a tax on it for them to do it. And like I always say, like as a creator, like the first step is I just don't want to lose money doing the thing that I love. I just want to do the thing that I love. Like, yes, would I love to get compensated for it? Yeah. But I also like it to not tax me for wanting to do the thing that I love. And it's really tough because I like say this, and I say this with like a little bit of force because I do think that it starts by all of us holding each other accountable to that.
It really does, because and that's the thing with a lot of full-time or professional artists, right? Is that they're working in multiple spaces. So you get an experience of what it's like to work with people of different calibers from different backgrounds. And that's how I know what I can expect, what I should plan to budget, et cetera, et cetera. Like a friend of mine who I met through theater, she does a lot of incredible stuff. She does a lot of live performances, and she has asked me to perform with her. She's asked me to make like content with her, and she has paid me like by like an hourly rate or whatever for the material, probably the best out of anyone that has ever paid me. And she's just an independent artist. When you work with people like that, you start to understand that there is so much value in what you do, and people are willing to pay, and they do respect you and your artistry. So then why, for people that absolutely can make something happen for you, why are you giving it away for free? Like, this person had hired myself and a few other people to do a live like band gig. We were doing, I think, like 4 songs. And we had a set rate, which was fantastic for what we were doing. It was a really nice rate. And then the event was a bit unorganized. So we didn't perform when we were supposed to. They ended up holding us for, I think, maybe like hour and a half, 2 hours. She paid us extra because that was our time as artists. She recognized that and she did it. She did not have to do that. I was blown away that that was something that she chose to do, not ask. She was like, by the way, I am paying you all extra because X, Y, and
Extra
Z.
time, yeah.
And so when you are working with people like that, right? People like us that are just that are forging their path, that are forging their career, and they know that if they want to work with artists, other artists, they have to provide something. When you're in that kind of mindset all the time, in that kind of space, and then you get approached by someone who has the means and they're like, actually, we can't do anything for you, it makes it kind of really clear. It makes it really black and white as to like, okay, they really don't see value in this. And if we are a dime a dozen to them, then why am I going to take a loss to do this? But that comes with more experience, working with more people, branching outside of just your comfort zone. And I think that's something that I also would encourage South Asian dancers. Like, it is great that we have our South Asian spaces and that we are getting really invested in building our community and our dance styles. But it also benefits us to step a little outside of that and see the larger performing arts world as well.
Yeah, no, I think like really good point, because I always look at it as like, yo, like there's no such thing as like South Asian like media yet, right? And that's why like all of our eyes are so small as to what we could ask for, right? Like when I ask for certain numbers, it's like people may think, oh, like that's fucking crazy. But then I see like the deals that like podcasters outside of our little space are asking. I'm like, yo, if Joe Budden, Andrew Schultz, Joe Rogan are making like $1 million a month, right, from nothing but just listenership, right? Like, why are we as like the South Asian creators like sad to ask for like $1,000 for a 3-month contract? Like, why is that like the craziest thing? So I want to bring it to something like tangible, because we're talking about like, yo, you guys are like vets in the space, right? Y'all have been doing this. So if I'm a dancer, right, how am I establishing what that number actually is?
Talk to people. Truly, just talk to people.
Physical numbers, right? Like if I'm like a dancer, right, and I have like Diljit came to y'all, right? Like, what is a drop? Like, yo, this is the number that I need.
You got to take into account not just honestly performing like for those 3 hours in the show, the time you take choreographing, the time commuting to where you're practicing.
Are they doing that? Are they choreographing the dances?
They are not choreographing the dances, but they are spending hours in rehearsal.
Okay, so they are doing rehearsals and stuff for this.
Yeah. They have to rehearse, and it's like, it's not just they did one dance. They did multiple dances with multiple costume changes,
props,
formations, all that stuff. So that definitely took hours to put together.
Okay, so this is like, because like I know like sometimes like you hear like the dancers like just show up and then they quickly choreographed it, right? And it's like, so this is like a full like multiple day thing for them. So then if you're again like taking those things into consideration, what is the fair value there? Like if I'm a dancer, they'll just ask me, right? What am I asking for?
I'll be honest with you, I don't have a number. It changes based on everything. But just like I did yesterday for my like wedding choreography services, I will call someone who has experience and I will talk to them and ask them through every single thing. What do you think is fair? What do you think I should be doing? Why do you think that? I make a call every time.
Who is that for you? Because I think that's like a lot of people like lose that, right? Because like I talk to like a lot of business owners and they have no idea what they should be paying their like creators, right? Like I had like a small business owner who like reached out to me. He's like, yo, like I need like influencers, I need micro influencers, but like I haven't gotten any response. And then I asked him, I'm like, what are you offering? and they told me the number, and I was like, that's exactly why you're not getting anybody, right?
Mhm.
So like, because who are you asking if you're a dancer, right? That knows like, hey, this is the payment. Because like so many of us are, like you're saying, figuring out what the ecosystem is, what our value in the ecosystem is. So like, how am I establishing? Because I was thinking about it, like, there's nobody I can really talk to about this, like getting brand deals for this, right? Other content creators, yeah, and I can kind of guesstimate.
That's the thing, right? And the way that you just went, other content creators, yeah, that tells me right there that there's some reason that you don't want to do that. And I think that that is exactly what I'm saying is we need to work through that as a community through our dancers to build that transparency, right? Like we should feel that comfort level to be able to ask that because like Aseer and I, right? If we were to go up for the same thing, I know that we bring different things to the table. So I feel secure enough to be like, hey, Aseer, if you're comfortable, do you mind telling me what they've offered you? This is what they've offered me for this. I have no problem in doing that because I'm secure enough to know that like, this is my value. This is what I can bring. And I can sell that to anyone any day because I am a professional artist. This is the brand that I've built. So we can have that kind of conversation. But if you don't feel okay enough to have that conversation, then yeah, it can't really go any further. But for something like this, like I would ask dancers that have done something similar to what I'm being asked to do, right? Like I always, if it's something dance related, I will start with one of my best friends, Ramita Ravi, who is like an incredible dancer, and be like, hey, what do you think about this? And she may say like, I don't really have knowledge of like this space, but for something that's kind of related, this is what I would do. Or she'll be like, oh, you know who you should talk to? So and so. And I've done that grapevine so many times for different things, right? I do it for when it comes to theater shows. I do it when it comes to putting on a live music show. I've done it for setting my my workshop prices. Like when I teach, like when I choreograph and I teach dance workshops, I have done that to say like, what can I realistically price this at? And then you factor in your own personals, right? Like for me, it's really important that if people that are coming to my workshop are going to multiple workshops a week, I don't want to make mine so expensive because that is my care for the people that are coming, that like you're spending a bajillion dollars a week to dance. Let me take it easy on you. But you have to just talk to people that are doing similar
It's so tough though, because I always say like the biggest thing, like the biggest benefit that like NFL or NBA has is all of these like contracts are like public, right? So you know exactly, you know what LeBron's getting paid, so you know where you fall. Like you see LeBron, and then you like know where you are in that, and then you can price yourself accordingly. I think it's like tough because it's like, yo, if you knew what Manpreet was asking and like what her rate was, you would look at her brand, you look at your brand, and you'd be like, okay, this is what I should be around, right?
Mhm.
But without knowing that, you're guessing. Like you're really guessing. Like sometimes like I like I'll hear certain numbers now and I'll be like, oh wow, you asked for that? And I'm like, oh, if you're asking for that, then I feel a lot better about asking for whatever the fuck I was gonna ask for. But if I didn't know that and I thought my number was the top, of course I'm gonna like shoot myself in the foot. But it's like tough. It's like, how do we get that? Because money is like such like a sensitive like topic. Like I don't expect, or I don't think it would be realistic for Manpreet to go on her IG and be like, yo, this is what I'm charging per
No.
show, right?
Of course not. And there's no reason for her to do that. But if you're working in a similar space, right? And I also like, yeah, I'm a dancer, I'm a choreographer. I'm not gonna go ask Manpreet, what are you making?
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna ask people that I have built a relationship with, or that someone I have a relationship with is close enough to them. And I always start with, if you're comfortable, are you willing to share? Because they have every right to say no if they choose. But like, you'll be surprised at what people are willing to offer. I am surprised at what I have offered. I had a dancer who was starting out say, I've never done a resume. Can you share your resume with me? And I like, up until recently, have been a little insecure about my resume. I didn't know if I had enough credits and et cetera, et cetera. But she asked, so I sent it. I was like, yeah, I mean, if you need help and if I can offer help, I believe in you, I'll send it. So like you won't know until you ask. And yeah, maybe you'll come up against a no, and maybe they'll be like, oh my God, like how could they ask me for that? And then that's something you live with, because your answer is, how could I ask you for that? Because I want to ensure that not only am I being compensated fairly, but that we can set a better standard for our industry. And if you're not okay with living with that answer, then like perhaps it's not for you.
No, and I think that's like where like the collaboration like needs to like happen like across the board, right? Like you guys got to look down, you got to look up, right? Like I always say, like these things like only happen through consistent conversation, right? I think we're like starting to wrap up, but I wanted to end this with like, yo, shout out to my folks that I'm in BD right now. Because I think that I just like recently went to like the Bengali Film Festival, right? And I was like, yo, it's crazy. Like, you're never gonna hold down people that were birthed from a revolution to not revolt against the shit that's going on, right? Like, that's never going to happen. Like, these people are like the blood of those people are from a people that have always stood up for what they thought was like right, and like that's always going to happen. And I think like just like this conversation, right? I think like a lot of us like people like love throwing around the term like standing on business, right? But I really think standing on like what is right and like pushing for it with some force, right? Because there's going to be like, even like we were joking around about this earlier, right? I was like, yo, there's definitely people that are probably going to be uncomfortable by this conversation, right? But it's like without that discomfort, like we don't move forward as a society, right? Like it starts with these tough conversations. Like I like again, like I always bring it back to like Manpreet like obviously said something and like she's going to get backlash and she did it for something that she didn't really have to.
Mhm.
But yo, if Diljit is going to then pay the next tour around, yo, it was a success. We moved the needle. Maybe not for even us, but we moved the needle, right? Like think about like all those dancers that y'all talked about, like yo, growing up, they probably never got the chance to even perform at some of these stadiums. Yo, and it's fire that we're able to do that now. But for the next ones up, hopefully they're able to get some bread out of this too, right? Yo, appreciate y'all coming on. Appreciate y'all having this conversation. I know this is like a deep topic, but appreciate like the insights that y'all brought. Thank y'all.
Thank
you.
you.
so much.
Absolutely. Peace. Incredible.